Good evening, Chelsea fans, and welcome back to Chelsea Waves. After a grueling few months for the side, Liam Rosenior seems to have provided Chelsea renewed vigour. We'll be reviewing a busy week for Chelsea following that headline win over Napoli in the Champions League to secure top 8 automatic qualification and pick the bones out of that crazy, frantic 3-2 victory over London rivals West Ham. Our chosen topic for this week is the man of the moment, Joao Pedro, who we're going to review in detail. We're going to get the opposition view from returning guest to the podcast, Aaron Joel Nutman, ahead of the second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final at the Emirates on Tuesday. Let's jump into it. Chelsea 3, West Ham 2. Yet another game of two halves under Liam Rosenior, as his side displayed the good, the bad, and the ugly to see off our London rivals on the 5:30 Saturday slot in the Premier League. George, you and I sat together in the East Upper for this match. I saw you were a rigorous note taker and assessing this one carefully, so I'll defer to you to talk through this one.
As you say, a game of two halves, and that statement is never held so true. Thought Chelsea were quite literally unrecognisable in that first half, in large part down to the I repeat, seven changes that we'll discuss shortly. But fair play, relegation threatened West Ham resembled 1970s Brazil. You had Bowen feasting in a channel vacated by apparent strangers in Badiashile and Hato. And we saw Wan-Bissaka and Diouf clamping down Gittins on Garnacho in emphatic fashion. Mateus Fernandes completely dictated the game. But fair play to Rosenior and the lads. Saw some serious spirit and resolve on display to rally and turn the tide. All three half-time super subs were instrumental in that remontada. And our very own Fernandes ultimately came up clutch with that special winner in added time. A really special win, an electric atmosphere at the bridge. But I think the overriding feeling for me is one of relief. You just simply cannot afford such wholesale changes against Premier League opposition for me.
A vital win, George, and as we were discussing during the game and before the game when the lineups came out, I am on board with the notion of rotation. I think it is critical in this grueling, you know, domestic European schedule that is modern football these days. However, when you look at Arsenal and you see the players there rotating towards, the likes of Mosquera, Hincapié at centre back, an abundance of defenders, they can come in and basically field a second line up there. Uh, in particular in attack, the likes of, Martinelli, Eberechi Eze, and you look at Chelsea in that West Ham game, and it really brings our frailties and the failings of our transfers over the summer into sharp focus, I feel. I am referencing in particular Liam Delap, Jamie Gittins, and Alejandro Garnacho. I couldn't even rank who was worse out of the three. Ominous signs for any future plans to rotate.
I just think Rosenia really talked up the importance of this game in advance. And then in contradictory fashion, say, filled seven changes. This is a feisty London derby. You've got opposition who are resurgent. And I just feel it really opens the door and gives that opposition that extra energy, that extra juice that actually this is a second string Chelsea 11. I'm okay rotating in a couple, game in, game out, but the spine for me simply has to stay. I mean, we're going to talk about Joao Pedro in a section of his own, but emphatic form for me, playing while he's on that run, and particularly the centre back partnership, the spine of the side. You never see Gabriel and Saliba rotated out. We need to find our formula and stick with that there for me.
Yeah, indeed. And I do want to pick up also, I've seen a couple of clips regarding obviously the atmosphere at halftime. I'm not going to hide from it. I was booing at the top of my lungs when that halftime whistle went, and I personally think rightly so. It was, but the scenes were pretty alarming when you saw fans, calling out. I think it was in particular Joel Hatto as he walked down the tunnel, and Trevor Chalobah had to intervene. We saw Robert Sanchez giving it back to the fans and saying, actually, correctly, that football matches are 90 minutes, and that aged like fine wine in the context of the game. Do you think it's fair for Chelsea fans to get on the sides back in those circumstances, or is this a long-term issue?
Generally, I would agree. It's harsh, particularly young players, young squad. but I think it's the element of our own making. We're shooting ourselves in the foot with that lineup. Every fan has trepidation anticipating a substandard performance, and that's exactly how it plays out on the pitch. So in my eyes, whether it's Resenio, whether it's interference from above, you're setting up that crop of young, inexperienced players to fail. I want to dip them in and out into a winning team surrounded by players who we know can cut it at that level and contribute. One of those should be Alejandro Garnacho. I thought it was a total disaster class from him. Admittedly, Wan-Bissaka, we have seen over the years, despite his deficiencies on the ball, he is a very competent defender, but he consistently seemed to be our outlet on that left-hand side, whether that was a tactical ploy. But I think he lost possession 12 times in the opening 45, 50 minutes. I mean, there was a one passage where it felt like he lost it five in 1 minute, but just not good enough for him.
He seemed to get back on track for a little bit. There was a couple of decent performances. I'm recalling specifically the two goals against Arsenal to keep us in contention in the Carabao Cup, but it's not the first time we've had to call him out specifically on this podcast for just an absolute horror show performance. I think the last one was actually Newcastle away where he missed a flurry of chances, and I don't know long term if he can be around, to be honest. And the same goes for Jamie Gittins. He looks terrified every time he gets the ball, and that probably won't have been helped by him obviously being subbed on and off in Naples. Would have obviously been detrimental to his already low confidence and self-esteem so far in a Chelsea shirt. But it just looks like we've blundered again and wasted 90 million essentially on forwards, and spurned other opportunities for more superior, ready-made Premier League footballers such as Antoine Semenyo.
Totally agree. Ultimately, we are looking at 3 points. So let's finish this section on a positive. Chelsea overturn a two-goal deficit at half-time for the first time in Premier League history. What does this say about the resolve of the side?
I think there is clear evidence now under Liam Rosenior of his ability to reshuffle the pack and identify his errors. I think the main feature and characteristic of Enzo Maresca that we despised really was his stubbornness. The idea that he sets out a team, sometimes it would go right, often it would go right in big games. Often it wouldn't against a low block, and particularly like recently promoted sides always seem to get the better of him. And we never saw any tactical adjustments till it was too late, effectively. Minute 77 was often his preferred slot for bringing the changes in our team. But we've seen obviously a couple of instances now, in particular over this week with the remontada, the 3-2 win away in Naples, against the odds there in the context of our team and how we tend to fare in those febrile atmospheres. So that felt like a real milestone for this team and once again demonstrating those powers of recovery against West Ham when it seemed impossible at half time. So I have to applaud Liam Rosenior. It's been an imperfect start for him, I think, for as Chelsea manager, but I would rather see someone able to accept errors and make the necessary adjustments than someone who sticks to their guns, as we frequently saw with his predecessor.
Napoli 2, Chelsea 3. A stunning spin at the fervent Diego Armando Maradona Stadium in Naples. Despite the frailties on show, a result that proves that this Chelsea side can hold up to the test of hostile environments, and ultimately one that sees Chelsea clinch a top eight spot and essentially a bye to the last 16 of Europe's finest competition. How did you see that one, Ryan?
I think it's quite remarkable, actually, how many parallels there are to the West Ham game and how that played out. I think there was far less rotation we saw from the side. Rosenior did seem to go full strength, with the exception of one tactical manoeuvre that we saw, which I think raised alarm bells from the outset, 1 hour before kickoff, which was obviously the decision to play Reece James as centre back alongside Wesley Fofana, trying to match Napoli stride for stride. But it looked uncomfortable, and we had obviously three centre backs in the form of Badia Schill, Achiampong, and Nathaniel Chalobah on the bench for that. So didn't look right, and that's basically how it played out. It was end to end from the outset. We found ourselves probably quite fortuitously in the lead with the concession of a penalty from Napoli for that handball from Juan Jesus. And it seemed to be old familiar failings for Chelsea in this match. You know, the inability to control the game, to, quieten down the crowd. And we saw, rather predictably, Napoli get back into the game and Wesley Fofana in particular exposed in that first half. But much like with the West Ham game, we saw Liam Rossini ring the changes, reshuffling his pack, and he brought on Cole Palmer and Trevor Chalobah, who made a massive difference with Reece James moving away from centre back into a much more familiar right back position. And ultimately, it was these, the spirit of the side and the powers of recovery that, as I mentioned, were so absent under Maresca. And that ability to manage a hostile atmosphere like a St James's Park or a Estadio Maradona, as we probably predicted for this match and as it unfolded in the first half. So I have to give massive credit to the team and Liam Rossini for spearheading that change mid-game, and Joao Pedro in particular, who we're going to discuss in detail, but just reaching an utterly incredible stretch of form for Chelsea and a couple of unerring finishes within that. I only wish we were signing more players with experience like he had already in the Premier League and who looked ready-made to compete at the top of European football. But only want to highlight the positives. Ultimately, within this game, it was a big milestone for this young Chelsea team and massive for us in the context of the Champions League and the fixture overload to secure that top eight and automatic qualification.
Just want to call out that Reece James selection. I think a lot of criticism, statement that it was potentially illogical. My brother actually made a really good point during that Arsenal Carabao Cup semi-final tie as to the incompatibility of Wes and Trev, just not capable of playing out from the back, as Resenya's clearly been keen to implement early days. So we've seen Shield paired, and ultimately I think he wanted to play Wes. There's clearly some element of rotation there, and deemed Reece to be the best bet. So while it didn't work out, I could see the logic.
Yeah.
I was personally, for the most part, absolutely buzzing that there were minimal changes to the lineup. Just as we've criticised Rosenia for those 7 changes against West Ham, I thought it was really great to see us pay that respect with that 3-man midfield. Santos retained in there with Caicedo and Enzo. And I'm hoping that one of the learnings from that West Ham game is that even against sides in the relegation zone, you do just leave yourselves vulnerable with that midfield too. I just don't think, particularly a fit, sub normal levels Cole Palmer in there, it is just not viable as a midfield three with Enzo and
No.
Caicedo. I want to see Santos reinstated. Let's talk about that Palmer cameo. I mean, obviously, subject to much ridicule post West Ham, spooning over the bar in almost rugby union fashion right at the end. But I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I thought his cameo in Naples was top. I thought he showed the poise and precision required to spin the tie. And for me, it's clear while he's not up for starting Premier League games, I think a super sub role for the time being is probably best bet up against tired legs, where he can really show his quality and strike for the Blues. How do you see his situation?
Think he's playing at about 30 to 40% of his potential, and I think it's to immense frustration for him. You can see it in his face. He's not happy. I don't think that's necessarily his position at the club or all the turmoil that's been going around Chelsea and the rumours swelling around him around the transfer to Manchester United. I think the frustration is born entirely out of his current state of fitness and his inability to provide what he knows and what we all know he's capable of. And um, I think even given those conditions, playing it, um, sort of a half-baked version of himself, we did see against tired legs, you see his ability to move the ball quicker than any of our other midfielders or attackers for that matter. You know, the 1-2s with Joao Pedro, the incisive left-footed passes into the channels, which really opened up that space, the flicks. I think there's real strong synergy and compatibility with Joao Pedro in particular. I think both of them have flagged this directly in interviews to the press since Joao Pedro signed during the Club World Cup. So it would be great to see those guys play together more and Palmer to find a way to regain his fitness. But I don't know how it's going to happen in amidst this busy schedule and the deteriorating options of our attack, I think, which was further evidenced and underlined by Jamie Gittins and Alejandro Garnacho in both their cameos, in fact, against Napoli and also West Ham.
I think you're spot on with sort of the mental element. Enzo Fernandez rightly has received raucous applause at the bridge, name chanted everywhere. Just cast ourselves a year back for two consecutive seasons. That was Cole Palmer. He was clearly centre stage. It was his side. Often claimed a one-man team. So it's got to be tough for him with both Moises and more recently Enzo Fernandez really stepping up to the plate. But I'm totally with you. I think that World Cup, just with Reece James in the last World Cup cycle, is weighing heavy on the mind. And ultimately, there needs to potentially be some short-term pain to see long-term gains and ultimately him restored to the top levels and sustain a career at world-class output that we know he's fully capable of.
I think for one of the upcoming episodes, George, we're going to need a sports therapist or a physiotherapist to come in and talk about this rare condition that we've seen. I think it's called pubaglia, which Cole Palmer has sadly succumbed to in his groin. I think there's been a couple of other players. Nico Williams for Athletic Bilbao is suffering with it as well and having a massively detrimental effect on his performances. And Lamine Yamal, who was struggling for a while last season with the same condition. So it does seem rare, but increasingly common, strangely, for three of the brightest prospects in Europe.
We had a little bit of insight from my brother, who's also had that groin pubalgia issue, but calling in any and all trained professionals, trained clinicians in the Chelsea Waves fan base.
George, we obviously know where we've netted out in terms of the likely opponents from the draw for the round of 16. It's looking like Newcastle or PSG, or in very unlikely circumstances, Carabao or Monaco. How do you think that looks from a Chelsea perspective? Is that a positive draw?
I think ultimately both represent slightly undesirable, ominous ties. Obviously, you got the Champions League holders in PSG, who we did emphatically beat in that Club World Cup final, but they will most definitely be seeking revenge there. Or the alternative would be a likely trip to St James's, where we've seen our side wilt before. But we did ultimately secure a positive result in a draw this season. So you probably favour the Toon Army. Not the most exotic of trips where yourself and I to land an away ticket, but probably a more favourable chance to progress.
Our topic for this week could only be one man, the man of the moment for Chelsea, steering us single-handedly to our best run of form this season and carrying our lackluster attack. Joao Pedro, or as we'll be calling him today, Woao Pedro. George, I know you have plenty to say on him, so I will defer to you once again.
A really special week from the Brazilian. Statistically, 4 goals, 2 assists, but could even have had more had he not been, in my opinion, wrongly rotated out for this Irons fixture. We saw phenomenal left-footed strikes, him being the catalyst for that West Ham spin, but just all round top tier number 9 play, reminiscent of that dazzling Club World Cup form that he hit the ground running for. I mean, we saw that strike against Fluminense and the delightful dink PSG that promised the world. I think we coined R9 reincarnate at the time, and as the season progressed, we started to look a little bit foolish after, I believe, that early promise in the West Ham fixture. It felt like we jumped the gun, and there re-emerged scrutiny around the 60 million fee to Brighton yet again for the falsest of nines, as many claimed. But thankfully, I'm actually increasingly believing that those claims that he was carrying a knock at the time are legitimate. So potentially coupled with an element of Maresca tax, sapping the energy from him. There's clearly good rapport with him and Rosenia already, but he looks every bit that number 9 we've been crying out for since Diego Costa, really. I mean, the curse of the number 9 has been very well documented, but I believe we have finally found our man. I think it's absolutely key that he's platformed as such. Well, I don't think penalties are going to be coming his way anytime soon to stat pad and add to the fuel on Twitter. For me, there should just be no debate around a consistent starting berth for him, particularly in the context of League One Liam.
I think the key also for Joao Pedro and his prospects for being that long sought after number 9 for Chelsea is going to be the management of his injuries. We know he has previously succumbed to long spells in the medical room, in particular for Brighton. I don't think there was any one injury in particular that burdened him, but it seemed to be a succession of sort of calf, hamstring injuries that he was suffering during his time for the Seagulls. So I know you're not a fan of rotation and you want him to be playing as much as possible, and I echo that entirely. But there definitely will be a case of management with him. I think there was one moment we saw recently in the endless briefings from Winstanley and Stewart to degrade Maresca since his sacking. Apparently, Joao Pedro asked for him to be removed from the matchday squad for that 2-2 draw against Brentford at the start of the season because he had played midweek before that and ended up starting after that in the midweek fixture to Bayern Munich away as well. So clearly there is a history of injuries there, which will need management as we move through this season and beyond. I think that brings us on to the next point is having a viable alternative, which Liam Delap isn't looking like, is he?
No, I mean, I called him League One Liam very early days, challenged him to improve. He ironically does wear the number 9 shirt, so you could argue that curse is very much continued, but he's now had more than enough chances for me. I think if you look at the caliber of opposition he's been fielded against of late, the likes of Bournemouth, Wolves, Paphos, there's no excuses really for him. You'd think now up to speed physically to really not be making a mark. I know you've raised points around potentially his efficacy being greater against sides that leave space in behind, etc. There was a brief, marginally better cameo against City, but I do think we're sort of feeding off scraps there. And for me, Joao Pedro simply has to start, and we need to see Liam really make a claim before he even comes close to a Premier League start for me. I have to say one element with that Joao Pedro injury record, that asymmetry, I guess, is that lack of trust in our medical team and those decisions for players being omitted and reinstated to an 11. There's been much derision of potentially a Hollywood recruited medical team from American sports not fully to grips with the English game. We have consistently cried that our injury record is a statistical outlier in the context of the league. So while Joao looks fully up to form and fit, I do want to see him playing a run of games. We see Moises and Enzo playing week in, week out in, I would argue, the most taxing position, central midfield, particularly when it's often just the two of them alone. And I think now, given that clear discrepancy with him and Delap, every Premier League game, every it is vital, every opposition respectful. He needs to be starting for me, and I particularly don't want to see him removed from the side when he's on a scoring run. So against West Ham, and then I believe previously against Fulham under Maresca, he was on 2-3 game goal streaks and removed from his side. I just think that is illogical in football terms. Everyone knows that for strikers, goals breed confidence, and very much one of the toughest, if not the toughest positions on the football pitch. So when someone's in a purple patch, let them cook.
How do you think he stacks up in the context of Premier League strikers currently, George? Is he at the top of the tree for you? In my view, it would probably be obviously Haaland at the top of that, undisputably. But Hugo Ekitike right up there. I think they're actually joint on goals currently. Him and Joao Pedro, and then below that you seem to have the next batch of quite overrated lump strikers. Victor Gyökeres and Sesko, who
It's funny you mentioned Gyökeres. I've actually seen many an Arsenal fan decry that signing, particularly citing both Ekitike and Joao Pedro as those heir apparents to, I guess, Thierry Henry's number 14 shirt. So I say I'm very chuffed and grateful that we've got Joao in our ranks. And yeah, why not? Statistically, you'd have to add Igor Thiago in there. But I'd like to think back up to speed that he's fully pushing the sort of top 3, 4 strikers in the league, which is a luxury we've not been afforded for a while.
Arsenal versus Chelsea, Tuesday night at the Emirates Stadium, second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final tie, with the tie locked at 3-2 to Arsenal on aggregate following their first leg victory at the Bridge. Both teams coming into this off the back of some decent Premier League form and a win on Saturday, and will lock horns for a place at Wembley. Here to talk through this is returning guest providing the opposition view, Aaron Joel Nutman. Aaron, welcome back to the podcast.
Cheers, Ryan. Thanks for having me back on. Clearly, first time went so well, but we're back again.
Indeed, we are. And we last caught up in November, and the landscape was very different from a Chelsea perspective, particularly. There was obviously talk around us potentially being in a title race. Our manager was Enzo Maresca, and things were generally positive around the club. A lot has changed since then, which we will talk through, but it would be great just to understand, I guess, from the Arsenal side of things, how things have progressed since November.
So as you mentioned, Maresca was still Chelsea boss. I think there were definitely talks of title charge, which I think have quietened down quite a bit now. In terms from the Arsenal point of view, I think basically similar stories to what it was in November. We were about 5, 6 points clear at the top of the table. We were top of the Champions League table. Um, we had a few injuries at the time. I think Gabriel was out. I remember he was out for that 1-1 early in the season.
Saliba was out as well, wasn't he?
Saliba was out as well. So no, I think we're looking pretty good at the moment, bar a few shaky results in the Prem recently. The result against Leeds yesterday really has instilled quite a lot of confidence back at the club. So yeah, things are looking pretty good from an Arsenal point of view at the moment.
Obviously, back when we spoke in November, sorry, you were already being labelled as Corner FC. I think things have only escalated since then, coming to a head once again yesterday against Leeds with another two goals from corners. I saw the statistic last week on one of the live Sky Sports broadcasts that you are 17th in the table for goals from open play, but then again, you are comfortably top of the Premier League and going well generally. How how do you think that has evolved around the approach from Arsenal, and is it cause for concern in light of a couple of nil-nil draws recently and obviously the defeat to Man United? Is there any concerns around your style of play and the sustainability of that long term?
So a lot of opposing fans seem to think that our style of play is pretty unsustainable, and I slightly tend to agree with that. However, we still somehow teams haven't worked it out. They still haven't worked it out. We're still scoring so many goals from corners. Another hilarious stat is that since the turn of I think since December, our highest goal scorer in the Prem is own goals. Although that might now be on level with Gyökeres after his absolutely incredible finish yesterday. Um, but we keep running these corners, these set pieces. I mean, you'll hear Arsenal fans singing "set piece ole ole." Um, so yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that whilst we're top of the table. But as long as the trophies come with it, I don't think any Arsenal fans will be complaining.
Obviously, winning is the priority, but in terms of the actual style, is it something enjoyable to watch at Arsenal, how they play these days? I don't mean that condescendingly either, but like we've seen Arsenal teams of all shapes and sizes down the years. We've seen plenty of teams with, flair under Wenger. It's a very different Arsenal. I remember you never used to score a corner famously, and now it's gone completely full tilt the other way now. Is it enjoyable? Do you think Arsenal are playing enjoyable football for fans? That's not loaded, by the way.
Um, to be perfectly honest, it's not great to watch. It's really not great to watch. But it's the Arteta sort of small margins win matches, and those small margins of, we hired a throw-in coach over the past few months, which I mean that hasn't helped at all.
What's his name?
Couldn't tell you. He's kind of been irrelevant.
Is he related to Nicholas Yoba?
I think I think he holds the world record in like
Javelin or something?
something like that, or longest throw. It's absolutely crazy.
Only Arteta looks for Olympians.
Yeah.
For yeah,
Um, but no, I think
no concerns,
yeah,
really.
no concerns again whilst we're winning. that United game we thought was could have been a turning point, even though at the time we were still, I think, 7 points clear. Um, but as I say, we now only leave London 3 times up until the end of the season, and I think those 3 games are City, Wolves, and Brighton. So the fact that we're staying near to London or playing at home for the rest of the year, and at home we are extremely strong. Again, the asterisk is that United game. I really think that we can bring that title home playing the way that we play, which sounds absolutely crazy given how slick and incredible the Invincibles played only about 20 years ago.
And turning back attention back to the Carabao Cup, you were obviously at the first leg at the Bridge. Arsenal take over the Shed stand, which you could hear significant noise during that game. It was quite a bleak one, I think, from a Chelsea perspective. Actually, we didn't play well. We had a huge number of players out, and actually, I think ultimately the 3-2 scoreline flattered Chelsea, and I was quietly pretty pleased with that, just to keep ourselves in contention coming into the second leg. How did it go from your perspective in the stadium?
Yeah, it was. I mean, winning at the Bridge is always a great result. However, going into that, when you saw the lineups, Chelsea basically fielded a B/C team, whereas we fielded, I think, our strongest 11, maybe bar 1 or 2 players. So to come away only winning that 3-2 felt not great, especially given the opportunities in that game. For example, the Gabriel header when I think we were 3-1 up, and that Marino chance as well, which both of those have just simply got to go in. So it doesn't feel great that we're only taking a 1 goal lead back to the Emirates. However, um, you've got to back Arsenal at home, I think. Without going into too much detail of what I think the score will be, 1 goal will be enough, I think. But that Chelsea game at the bridge, that first leg at the Bridge, was totally there for the taking, and I really don't think we did that, especially with both of Garnacho's goals were so similar. I just can't believe that we didn't work it out after the first time. I also think that was Rosinia's second game in charge, and it's a totally new, club to him, totally new style, and I don't think we took advantage of that enough, to be honest.
You mentioned the new manager, Rossignol. Obviously, he's been the brunt of many a joke from yourself on WhatsApp groups, etc. How have you seen his start to Chelsea? Obviously, it's looking positive now. I think it's 5 wins in six after the win yesterday against West Ham. David Brent jokes aside, Will from in between his jokes aside, how do you see Chelsea's trajectory under the new man?
I don't think I can put those jokes to one side, but the ages men quote is an absolute all-timer, and I'll be using that for a very, very long time. Aside from that, he's actually, I mean, recently I think he's been doing pretty well. I think of his 6 or 7 games, he's won them all bar one. You might have to fact check me on that.
5 wins out of six.
So,
The one other game obviously being the first leg of the Carabao.
yeah, so 5 out of 6, I think is pretty impressive, especially that one in Napoli was an unbelievable result. I caught the end. Well, I was listening to the West Ham game on the way back from the Arsenal game yesterday, and it sounded like he just got his team selection totally wrong. Now, granted, Chelsea's squad is about 35 players, and all of those players I think are pretty good. Like there's pretty decent quality in that squad, so I understand why he wants to rotate. Um, and again at halftime he made 3 or 4 subs that totally changed the game. So fair dues to him. I think look, the second leg is a really big opportunity for him to, lay a marker down, and even if Chelsea don't win it, or get through to the final, it's important that they put in a good performance for him. I think in the future, I mean, who knows with Chelsea? Like you go through managers like it's going out of fashion. I mean, will he be sacked? He could be sacked in 2 weeks' time. You really never know, with Bluco, but. I think he's different to the managers you had. I think he's much more likable. I mean, I absolutely love him. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. He does age men.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for the time being, Chelsea just need to have a stable manager, and and I think they could have one with Vitinha. So who knows?
And finally, obviously Arsenal's just the one trophy under Arteta so far, and the allegation thrown at Arteta is obviously that was a win with Emery's squad after just taking over mid-season there. What would a Carabao Cup win mean to Arsenal in 2026 and getting more silverware on the record?
I think it would do a lot for this season's push of trophies. I think if we win the Carabao, which I think we have a pretty decent shot of that, I think that will really boost the squad to go out and finish the Prem, go deep into Europe, and I mean the FA Cup, who knows? But we've got a pretty favourable draw in the fourth round. So it will be big in the context of this season. I think if we don't beat Chelsea and if we get knocked out to Chelsea, there could be real question marks about, the classic, will Arsenal bottle the league if they're bottling Carabao and all the other cups that they're in? But it is pretty striking that in 6 years under Arteta, we've won one FA Cup, which, as you say, wasn't really his squad. That's not a stick to beat him with because that's still, I think that was very impressive, that FA Cup win in itself. Um, but he really, we've said it for the last 2, 3 years that we need a trophy, and there will be questions at the end of this season if we come away with nothing.
Yeah, we saw for Chelsea when we kick-started the regime under Roman Abramovich. Jose Mourinho came in and launched himself in English football with a EFL Cup. I can't remember what it was called then, the Carling Cup, I
Yeah,
believe.
the Carling.
A win
Yeah,
against yeah, a win against Liverpool at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, and that really catapulted us onto greater success in that season and beyond, as you know. So I think it definitely can serve as a real platform for success down the line. Just finally, then, Nutman, let's get a score prediction from you.
I'm coming in pretty hot today. I think we're going to win 3-0 pretty comfortably. I think we're going to play our strongest team. I think Chelsea, well, I don't know if Rosenior knows what his strongest squad is, but given he started, I think Palmer played the line, maybe I think he played the whole game yesterday. And he's Chelsea's most important player, one of them. Joao Pedro is hitting unbelievable form at the moment as well. But I just think Arsenal at the Emirates, I think we might be too much to handle for Liam Rosenior's Chelsea this time.
I think any hopes of us prevailing on Tuesday night will depend on Esteban being back in the squad and available. He was absent yesterday and back in Brazil for personal reasons, which we're unaware of. Obviously, the nature of those circumstances, or whether he'll be back in the squad. But I think, given the fact Palmer played 90 and looks a shadow of himself physically at the moment, of his former self, I should say, I think we're really going to rely on the 18-year-old Brazilian to get us any chance of getting over the line here. I am going to go for a plucky 2-2 draw. I think Chelsea will push Arsenal close to the line, but I don't think we are quite going to have the tools to get this one done and overturn the deficit currently. So calling a 2-2 draw.
Absolutely buzzing for the game at the Emirates tonight. A big shout out to Elliot for copying me a ticket at the last. Going to be punchy and call for a continuation of spins this week. I'm tasking Chelsea to channel and take inspiration from Carrick's United at the Emirates. Arsenal are not infallible. And I'm going to back Rosenior to pick a strong 11 that ultimately is going to take this game into extra time to really test that Arsenal side. So I'm going to call for a 2-1 Chelsea win with Joao Pedro continuing his hot streak. And I'm going to go for Chelsea progressing on pens with Super Bobby Sanchez proving he is a top keeper once and for all. Up the Chelsea.
Nutman, thanks very much for joining us again. This might be the last one for the season, although we do have a Premier League game still to come. So let's see, we might go for a third round and review all of this. But thanks again for joining. Thanks everybody for tuning in once again this week. We hope you are all enjoying the podcast, and please do remember to subscribe to us on TikTok at CFC Waves for more short form content throughout the week. We'll be back next week to review yet another busy week for the Blues as the fixtures keep coming thick and fast. Thank you all and see you then.